Hey everyone, it's Hunter here with 360 LSAT Tutoring, and today we're talking with Ethan. Ethan scored a 170 on his LSAT, and he's here to give some advice and tips about the LSAT. If you like the video, go ahead and drop a like, subscribe. We're doing a series where we talk to people that scored a 170 or above and get their LSAT journey, as well as tips from them, tips to help you improve on the LSAT. So if you are interested in LSAT tutoring, go ahead and reach out to us. Our email is below, and we would certainly be happy to help you. Without further ado, let's get into the interview. Okay, I'm here with Ethan, and Ethan scored a 170 on his LSAT, and he's here to talk about some of the tips that he learned along the way, kind of his LSAT journey. So without further ado, I'll let Ethan introduce himself.
Hey, thank you for having me, Hunter. I am, one of 8 kids, so that's probably the biggest thing about me. I grew up learning to share, but I taught middle school English for a couple years after undergrad, and I thought I was going to be teaching for 30 years. And I kind of had it in my mind to take a diagnostic and see if I would want to go to law school. So I took the diagnostic and got a 151, that's like a normal score. And I was like, okay, I could do this then. And I, spent that next time preparing and all that. But I've always loved reading, and obviously I studied and majored in it, so that was definitely a boon. It helped me out. But besides that, nothing crazy. Besides, I'm about to move from South Carolina to Minnesota and freeze my butt off. So
I'm from Florida, so I know. I'm not looking forward to the cold weather either.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, and I guess I should add my undergrad time. Because I knew I was going to be a teacher, I was kind of coasting. So my GPA was a 3.27. So I definitely enjoyed my undergrad, and I did not have a good GPA score coming into this cycle. So I'm very fortunate in my mind to get into any school, let alone a very good school.
Yeah, so even for you, it's even more important for people that don't have the GPA that they wanted to get a good LSAT score. So I think that can definitely help. Okay, so the first question I have for you is, how long did it take you to study for the LSAT and achieve your 170? And what was your study schedule like when you were studying?
Yeah, all right. So in terms of time frame, so it was about 6 months from the first diagnostic to when I signed up for the test. Originally, I'd wanted to sign up for January, right? So I started studying in October of 2020, and I was thinking I would go that next year. But I looked at my score, and I looked at the going, thoughts online, and I said, okay, I'm not going to be able to score well enough. I was aiming for a 164. And so I thought I'm not going to be able to score well enough by January or any of the sort to then apply. So I put off my take until April, which was 6 months out. And I felt like half a year was a good amount of time. And then I ordered that book, the LSAT trainer, and I got, it was really helpful. They had a free online schedule, and I think theirs was like 16 weeks, but I extended it to 20 weeks. But basically my studies looked Monday through Friday. I would get home from teaching. I would have, 10 to 20 minutes to myself or however long I needed. And then I'd go sit down at the kitchen table that I had and just sit and study for an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours if it was like a long chapter or it took a long time. And that's another thing. All of my studying was on, pen and paper. It was all books. I didn't do one of the online ones, the 7 Sage. I know those are very lauded, and I know people who have used them and done really well with them. And I guess for me, it was easier just to be sitting and reading like a real normal book and writing with pen and paper. And then on weekends, either Saturday or Sunday, I'd pick a day. I would wake up around like 7:30. I'd make myself 2 eggs and toast, and I would eat it, and I would walk around a little bit and drink my coffee. And then I would sit down at 8 and take the test, and I would take it under the real conditions. And after I did that, I would give it a few hours and then go over all the questions that I got wrong. Now at the beginning, there was a lot of frustrations. If I didn't understand a question or why I got it wrong, I would go to YouTube or go to the internet and basically have to sit and realize, oh, okay, that does make sense. I'm a doofus. But I do think over the course of this 6-month time frame, you just kind of build that conditioning in your brain that just gets you in the zone. You're not going to freak out and panic when you do this every single week and your brain is just waking up ready and it's just another day. So I think that was a huge thing for me. And then as well, because I was doing it on tests, or on paper tests, it was definitely different to move from the paper to the online, where you can flag answers and go back to them easy, rather than me folding a page and like circling a question and all that. But anyways, I might have gone on a tangent to your question.
No, something that you mentioned there that I really like was you kind of studied the way it fit you. You said you would rather sit down and read a book. And I think that's a question I get asked a lot, is what's the best way to study, right? And the answer is tough, because it really depends on who you are. Like, a lot of people don't like to sit down and read a book, so they'd rather have that video or something like that. So it kind of depends. Like, you have to know yourself and figure out what works for you. So I like
absolutely. I think especially with like the part of the reason people like the online ones is it tells you what you're deficient in, what you're successful at, and it's able to select specific things. And some people need to just get that one-on-one time. I've done a little bit of like on the side free tutoring where I like disclose, listen, I'm not professional at all. I'm going to help you if I can. And, it's with my friends, but, you sit down with them and you just basically go through it with how I would do something or how I would think about it. And I'm sure there's much better people out there with it, but some folks need that. They need that one-on-one time where, I don't know, someone else is basically impositioning themselves. Does that make sense? I don't even know, but, requiring you to be, conducting that type of training.
I definitely think that makes sense. Like, I think that, a lot of people need that one-on-one attention. Not only is it really good to have that one-on-one attention, but it also can keep people accountable, right? If you're going to be meeting with someone, once or twice a week or something, it can be really good to have that person and they say, well, did you go over that material that we had talked about? So I think that that's really good too.
Well, and let me add to that point then, because over the course of 6 months, my God, there was a lot of days, if you can imagine teaching during a pandemic, you go into school. I was in person the whole time because my governor was very insistent that all kids need 5 days of in-person a week. He was right. What a guy. Okay. But so I was in school teaching with my mask on and it was goofy because I would go to the grocery store and I'd be the only one wearing a mask and people would be like, how are you breathing? And I'm like, all right. But I was teaching and I would come home and not want to study. And so there were plenty of days where I just wouldn't do what I had set aside for myself to do. And I would feel bad about it. And I would feel like, oh, I'm wasting my time and I'm not going to do well. And then on a Saturday or Sunday, I would take a practice test and I would score low. And, my practice test scores were like 151 and then 154, 154, 155, 160, 163. In that range, I had 166. That was the highest I ever scored on the practice test on the pen and paper. And then, it makes you feel bad. It makes you feel like, damn, I'm doing it wrong, or I'm not improving. Like, if you get the same score as you got 2 weeks prior, and this is, I guess the way that I was doing it is I was taking tests every 2 weeks or so. And when you get that feedback of you haven't improved, it can affect your, I guess and maybe my brain's not working this morning. I need my coffee.
To keep going.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds fine. Ambition to keep going. And so
it's so tough. And with the LSAT, it's like there's you get a feedback of your score, and it's so binary. Mm-hmm. Okay, I got a 162,
right?
Whatever it is, and even if you had gotten, let's say you got a 163 the previous week, you're like, oh, I did worse. Well, I mean, that's one question. So
it's funny you say that. 163 is what I scored a few days before my LSAT take. Mind you, I just broken my first bone in history, 2 weeks before my take, which it wouldn't be so bad. It's going to sound funny. It was my pinky, right? So not even a big deal, but it was on my writing hand. So I was not the happiest. I was clacking away on the LSAT writing when I did it. Which, I mean, that's not talked about a lot, the LSAT writing, because it's not something that is too crucial, but they will look at it. I would suggest looking up some LSAT rating before starting. This is, side topic. Yeah. Nobody really prepares for it, but you want to just go through every possible argument of that and write as much as you can. And then the time will run out and you'll go, okay, I hope that was good. Yeah. But yeah, I took a test literally the week of my LSAT and I got one of the worst scores I've gotten in a while, the 163. And I was like, okay, if I can get a 164, I'm going to be happy. And, I got very fortunate. I had logic games that I understood because I had been doing every week or every 2 weeks. I had been setting up the practice tests, but even on my Monday through Fridays, you would go through logic game sections or you would go through a exercise that would test out your logic. And I didn't panic. I mean, I'm sure we're all terminally online, but like the same day afterwards, I went online and I was reading people's comments about the logic game section, and they were like, those are the hardest miscellaneous games ever. And I was like, oh heck, was I overconfident? Did I actually bomb it? Mm-hmm. So then I guess this is another unsolicited advice is don't stress. Once you've taken it, we're very harsh to ourselves. We're harsh critics, but let it be until your score comes out. Because otherwise you're going to spend, some waking terror like me, and you'll go, oh man. Which the morning of, all my students knew that I was getting my score. And got it. Yeah, I was making them take a test on Fahrenheit 451 that morning. I had scheduled it to coincide with when it would release, so they'd be all quiet.
Yeah.
And they were like, are you going to tell us your score? I was like, yeah, of course. And they were like, even if you do badly? And I was like, of course. I might cry, but you guys are going to get to know. You've been a part of it. And so I was refreshing the web page when it came out. It was 8:53 a.m. So for all of you neurotic folks who are going to be looking at the score before it comes out, 8:53 is when mine did. So
there you go.
You've got a whole time frame of 7 minutes before that you can start refreshing, and it could update. And like, the score populated in that little bubble that it shows up in, and I gasped. I was like, oh, and one of my students goes, oh no, is it bad? And I was like, no. Oh man.
That's such a cool perspective. I mean, you had all those kids along with you for.
Oh, it was one of my favorite memories. Even though they were testing, they just all erupted. They were shouting. They were like, "Call your mom! Call your mom! What do you want to hear?" And so I did. I called my mom and I was like, "Hey, I got my LSAT score." I had her on speaker. She was like, "Oh, how'd you do?" And I was like, "Well, take a guess." And she guessed like 180, and I was like, "No, lower." So then she went down, and I was like, no, lower. And I made her keep going, but she was like 160. And I was like, no, lower. She was 150. And I was like, Mom, lower. And she goes, oh no, you were studying so hard. And I was like, I'm just kidding, Mom. I did really well. So,
that's awesome. That's such a good story.
It was fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so as far as any like specific advice on the logic and reasoning or the games or reading, do you have anything that stands out to you as really good advice to give people?
Oh, reading was it's ironic, but as an English teacher, you'd expect me to be good at reading, but reading was probably my hardest section to improve. And obviously, just the speed of reading, I was fortunate that I am reading very fast. And so I was getting through all the sections no matter what. It's just comprehending it and being able to answer the questions was messing me up. So it took me the longest time to finally realize it doesn't matter what the reading is about. And, no matter what reading you get, it's going to be, oh, scientists are studying A and they say B, and therefore C exists. But other critics say D. It doesn't matter. So day of my reading sections, I don't even remember them. I just, in my brain, treated them as big word term, because they use a lot of big terms that I just wouldn't understand. So I would go through these passages and basically have this giant word that means something, and it would be in my brain for a second. I would read the questions and go back and look at it. I wouldn't read the whole thing again. I would read it once and then go to the questions. I know some people say read the questions first or read it twice and then go to the questions. There's no time for that. No time for messing around, in my opinion. So I just treated it like a logic game of sorts, like a puzzle piece that was being put together. And it was very fortunate that it worked out for me. Logical reasoning, that was also very difficult to improve. So my logic games were about minus 1 and -0 of the last few tests I took. Except for whatever that 163 one was. I don't even remember. But that one doesn't even exist in my brain. That one sucked. That was one of the.
Yeah, when like people will ask me after I took the test, kind of similar to you, like what was it on, and I'm like, I don't know, like I don't remember what it was, because it is everything so formulaic that it doesn't matter much what it's on. I mean, I do tell people like while you're taking the test, doing the reading, you do want to feign interest in it. Like you want to be interested in the subject because you're gonna be more likely to remember stuff. So even if it's something boring, at least try to be interested. But
you gotta force yourself. You gotta. It's even if you hate it. Gosh, the logic games I remember. I have there were 2 miscellaneous games on my test that I remembered, and I set them up again afterwards by myself, and I went through them, and I went through all the questions that I remembered. And there was only one question that I missed, and it was one that I changed literally as the clock was going down to 0. I was going between like 2 choices, and I picked it. And I know I got that one wrong. So I was like, okay, oops. But that was, if you're one of those archivists online, it's the bookstore game, and then there was the tour guide in different countries game. So they were both miscellaneous. They were very goofy. I messed up my setup for one of them at first because I just wasn't comprehending how to do it. And I think with that, if you take more practice tests than me, you will encounter more weird logic games that you can. Excuse me. I hope that doesn't come on the camera or the podcast. I just burped a little bit, but excuse me. But if you encounter a lot of logic games, and just, don't panic, because I could have panicked if I set this one up and I said, okay, this looks awful, I don't know what I'm doing, and I just restarted. I was like, what's a better way to put this? So I made like a table instead of a two sides, whatever. It was like 3 different months and 6 different tour guides, all given the whatever it was, and so I had to set it up funky.
Yeah.
So don't let yourself, like, obviously you'll get thrown off because it's the day of, you don't know what's going to go on. But if you do have like a moment of panic, don't let that affect you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I know, like, if you go through and, like you said, if you set something up wrong, right? It is so easy to panic and be like, oh, I just lost that amount of time. I mean, there's nothing you're going to be gained by panicking, right? And it's easy to say not to panic, but really it is something that with a lot of practice you can learn to not panic. You just kind of start over and reset it up. Now you already have a lot of the information about the game in your head, so it's going to be quicker the next time you set it up. So you're not going to lose the full, say you took 4 minutes setting this other one up, you're not going to lose the full 4 minutes because you're going to be quicker setting up the second time, right? If you made a mistake.
Yeah.
So you
and that's you're right. It's tough for us to say don't panic to everybody necessarily, but I think being able to, put yourself in this mindset and be prepared. And obviously it sucks, but I'm someone who in years past was prone to panic attacks, and so I discussed that with a professional, right? And I treated it, and I haven't had one in years now, which is great. But that's not everyone's case. But there was another instance. So everyone knows ProctorU. I was using my work computer for the years I was teaching, right? I didn't have my own computer. I purchased a cheap, like $500 computer that met the requirements for the LSAT, specifically to take the LSAT. And that piece of junk broke, like, because I opened and closed it, over the course of less than a year, it unhinged it. And so ProctorU worked fine for me, right? I looked at the requirements beforehand. I made sure that my computer was going to run it. My work computer, it would not have. It was a Mac, and it was crashing, and it was like, yeah, this won't work. But in my reading comprehension, on the third passage I was reading, mind you, I haven't touched the angle of the computer at all, so the camera is the same. And I'm reading the third passage. The proctor interrupts me and says, "Move your camera down. I can't see like everything." And I, deer in the headlights, I was like, "Are you kidding me right now?" Like, in the middle of this third passage, and this was like my second or third thing. It wasn't the beginning. It wasn't like, oh, I've just decided. But I sat there for a second and said, "Not going to freak the heck out. I'm just going to move the camera." I did like a thumbs up, and they said, "That's good." I was like, cool. So, and I had to restart reading. I thought I was about to fail the reading comprehension because I had to restart that passage. But
it does seem like something that seems like something so simple, but when you're in the middle of a test and you're so focused, right? You're like, some small distraction like that can really throw you off.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're so dialed in, and then all of a sudden that world that you're in kind of just evaporates it, and now you have to kind of refocus. So like that, not panicking is so crucial. I mean, that could have easily cost you several points.
Which I think, conditioning. If you've spent months and months and put yourself in that mindset, like, let's say you anticipate being having test anxiety and anticipate having maybe a minor attack or something of the sort, being able to put that conditioning in your brain so that you're just used to it, and you can treat it like any other test. If there's just some random person across the country or in a different country watching you, because when I was taking my test, my cat would come up and slink around and whatnot. I was fortunate. My roommate at the time, this is a whole separate story, but my roommate, who's also my ex, we were in 2 separate bedrooms, but she was very nice and kept the cat in her room because she knew I was taking the test that morning. But those minor distractions, they come and go, and you just have to, you have to accept it's going to go one way or the other. You're either going to let it completely derail your train of thought, or you're just going to do the best you can no matter what. And unfortunately, some people's ProctorU experiences were much worse than mine. And I'm sure you've heard all the horror stories. And so I did what I could to prevent that.
That's great. So next question I have is kind of along those lines. But do you have any advice for, or was there anything that you would have done differently looking back at the LSAT you're studying, whether it be
Gosh.
overall studying or studying for a specific section?
So that's very tough. So my studying was just so regimented. I literally read 2 books and I did 12 practice tests out of like the 10 actual tests. So for me, I'll say no, just because I had a goal score and I did better than my practice. So I wouldn't go back and change it. I think there was some days where I just would come home and not want to study, and you would feel bad. Maybe you would take 3 days in a row and be like, oh, I'm awful. And this is midst of the pandemic, midst of, bad feelings, March. So I took it in April. March, you get personal relationship issues pop up. And so it's very difficult to, maintain your confidence and maintain that just routine. But I think for me, the routine kept me performing. Because if I let a week or 2 weeks go by without taking a test, then I'll start losing it. It's like a language, because I think if I sat down to take a test now, I wouldn't score anywhere near what I had.
I think you're right on that. Is if you set a routine, you want to stick to it, right? And something that I've always told people is you want to set a routine, and then you can set in breaks for yourself, right? But set a routine and then stick to it, and then give yourself enough breaks that you can keep to the routine. I mean, you don't want to set an unrealistic routine. Like with you're working all day, and then you don't want to come home and you're not gonna study for 6 hours. It's just not possible.
Oh God, no.
So you had to set a realistic routine that okay, I can keep this up in the long run.
I think some folks will try to brute force the study routine. They'll go, well, I studied for 8 hours every day for, a month. Why didn't it have that result? And that can be extremely frustrating because you are putting like a full-time job into it and you're not seeing results. And I think a lot of it, yes, the LSAT is solvable and you have to, but it's solvable in the way that you can recognize all these different question types. And you're not going to in 1 month just be complete, unless you're a super genius, which those guys exist. They're out there. I know a few people and they're absolutely wonderful. One of my good friends, she was under 3.0 GPA, but super high LSAT, like 175 plus. And she's doing great. And that is a thing. I know you mentioned it briefly at the beginning, is like, if you have a low GPA like me, you need to get a high LSAT to offset that. And so literally do everything you can to get that high LSAT. And if I wasn't on the subreddit, if I wasn't looking at that, like graphs of different people getting in, because I saw my GPA when it got calculated by LSAC, I could have said, oh, I'm not going anywhere. I'm gonna phone it in. I'm not gonna study anymore. I was very reassured by the stuff I was seeing. Yes, there was like those random folks who got lucky, but there are also some schools where you can basically tell if you get this LSAT, you have a good chance of getting in. So it's definitely a labor, right? It's something that you have to do if you want to get that outcome. And if you overwork yourself, you're not going to have the best results. You're not going to do well. There were 3 or 4 LSAT practice tests I took in a row where I just wasn't improving, and I took a week off. I took like a whole week and I didn't touch it, and I was miserable. I was, going to work, coming home being like, wow, I'm not improving. I'm going to fail, whatever. But, I've let that awful criticism that we always have of ourselves, let that simmer and, go back at it. And I guess keep the faith in that regard, keep your studies. So I returned to them and I did the, exercises. I went through various like logical reasoning, reading comp, and, you have to get over that hump. You hit a wall. Sometimes you hit it for longer than other times, but almost all the like stories I would hear of people who were scoring like those high scores, they would hit a plateau and they would think, okay, I've peaked. I can't get any better. But that's a myth. You can always get better. You can always improve. This test is super solvable. And I think it is a lot of just training. And so because for me, the first 4 months, I couldn't parse out every logical reasoning type. Like if you ask me, oh yeah, that's a strengthen, or oh, which one of these would, I don't know, is most necessary to make that argument or something, I would have had to think and spend time. But once you just condition yourself at that point, your brain is like, okay, I've seen this one. I'm going to look for a question that does this. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
long time.
I think that you make a great point there. You want to get to the point, and I think most of the people that are scoring 170, again, besides maybe like crazy geniuses, they get to a point where it's just everything second nature. Like you take the test and you're not even really thinking about it. You're just doing it, right? So that not only takes study time, like you mentioned, but you had mentioned too that it takes physical time. Like even if you study for 8 hours a day for a month, you're not gonna see like the same results that over time that you would see if you study for 4, 5, 6 months. It takes physical time for you to kind of gain that knowledge, and kind of to your point, time away. Sometimes I know there were a lot of tests where I'd never scored better than after I took a week off. So I know some people don't have the like the benefit of having a ton of time to take the LSAT, but if you do, give yourself enough time to put in those breaks and take a week off for sure.
I do see a lot of people who will post, I'm taking my first one in June and then I'm going to take one in September. And I'm like, why are you signing up for June? I personally, I don't think it's necessary to spend the money and waste it unless you're very confident that you're performing, at an average that's above what you want. So take a look at your school's medians, whatever target school you have. If it's Harvard, then, you got to be scoring a 174 on all your tests before you can feel like, that's a terrible example because Harvard's got the highest median. I got rejected from Harvard. If that, which if you make an admissions podcast, that's a whole separate thing. I had like 14 rejections or something, which that's its own stress.
It is, right? That's something. Yeah, that's something. That's equally as stressful. But yeah, I think you make a great point there, for sure. Okay, next question I have is a question, the most common question that I get, and it's how do I get from X score to a 170? So for this, how long does it take? For this instance, we'll say how long does it take to get from a 150 to a 170? What's a good estimate for you of maybe a common amount of time that people will go from 150 to 170? You basically have that almost perfectly. So
right, I did. So I took 6 months, right, and I took the probably the upper range of the advised study time. Now, also I was working full time, and so I figured I'm not going to do it in the normal time. And I wasn't preparing to score 170. I was preparing to score a 164, 165. I was really hopeful to get that. So for me, it was 6 months, and I think for other folks, they can probably do it in 4 months. I mean, I've heard people who do treat the LSAT like a job, and they study like 8 hours a day every week, and so it's probably much quicker for them, and other people just get it quicker and they're able to adapt quicker. And I'm not like that. It took me a long time to relearn how to read for this test because I'm used to reading silly books about, Paradise Lost or something. I'm not used to reading this volcano critic said that the volcanoes are actually this old, and it's like, oh wait, but he meant that, and this is what he supports. So it takes time. I do think if you've got a goal and you give yourself the range, I don't think you should limit yourself, because for me, I was going to limit myself. I was going to sign up for a January test, which I would have only had like, gosh, okay, I'm going to do some math here. I was an English teacher, forgive me. October, November, December, three months, right? All right, 3 months, maybe a few days. I would have probably scored a 160 or lower if I took it in January.
I like that point because people, they'll say, oh, I have to take it in, whatever, January, right? And I mean, unless there's a really good reason to do that, right? You're kind of limiting yourself, right? I always tell people to sign up for the test when they're ready. Again, that's a luxury that some people may not have. But if you do have that luxury, take it when you're ready. You don't need to rush into taking the LSAT. The more time you give yourself, the better. Not only is you're going to score better, but you're also going to reduce some stress, because if you had forced yourself to take it into January, you would have tried to, force every ounce of knowledge into yourself. At that
well, I would have scored poorly, and I would have applied with that score, and I would have felt like there was still points on the table, and I would have questioned it and doubted it. And I think it's, people do set a timeline like that, and they're like, I need to do it by this time. And for me, I had the luxury of being in a career and being able to say, okay, well, I can wait a year. Now I finished teaching. I quit. I retired. Because after the second year of COVID, I was pretty fed up teaching. It was very stressful. The kids were awesome, Some of the parents weren't. South Carolina was in the news a lot, I'm sure. Well, in South Carolina it was, but maybe not everywhere. But it's tough. I mean, I basically finished out the year and then I took a job teaching remote in the middle of nowhere for a semester, which was very dystopian. But after I took the LSAT, I was free. I had no burden. It was, between April to then late August when I began applications.
Yep.
So if, don't cut yourself short. If you think I can score this, but I would need more time, it pays dividends. It's an investment. I wouldn't have been offered the amount of money I was offered at schools. I mean, first of all, I was shocked to get into these schools. And so then I was shocked to get any money at all. And the fact that they're willing to pay me significant sums of money, it's all because of that LSAT. It's nothing to do with me. I mean, I'm a white Jewish guy from South Carolina, and I don't, there's nothing about me that deserves this money besides that LSAT score. And it is, besides the way that every applicant is going to be imposter syndrome and self-criticize, we're all equally worthy. We're all, good and honest people. And I think it's easy to criticize ourselves in that way, but give yourself the time, because I would treat it like an investment and look at it like you're going to be getting $100,000 if you spend an extra month. So if you're like, oh yeah, I can just take it, and then if I don't like my score, I'll take it again. Like, I mean, you are paying what, $300 to sign up and sit for it. I don't know how much it is, maybe $215 now, but that's groceries for a month.
Yep.
That's a student loan payment, a little less than a student loan payment. I've been fortunate that those were paused. So I can't make that same decision to just take it over and over again. And then I know it's unpopular, but schools, like if you are going for top 14, I know Michigan specifically has it on their website that they'll average your scores. And so if you take it more than once, they say that the average looks is more, what do they say, telling of how you're going to do in your first year. So if you have, let's say everything else is equal between you and one other candidate, and you've got a 150 on record and a 170, they're going to average your score versus same exact candidate, but only the 170. So maybe that will push you out. Maybe it won't, but we'll never know what we get in despite and what we get in because of.
Yeah, I like that point of the monetarily. I think spending time in the LSAT is really good investment, unless you're already working a job that you're making a ton of money. But
yeah, like a teacher.
Yeah. So definitely probably a good investment for you. For all the teachers out there, probably a really good investment. So you might as well do as well as you can on the LSAT, because it's going to increase your scholarship so much. I mean, 1 point on the LSAT can really increase your scholarship. So you want to?
I mean, I might if I had 1 point less, I wouldn't have gotten into places that I did. I mean, I'll say I was deciding between two schools, George Washington and Minnesota, and I have family in DC, and so I was all thinking that I was just going to stay in DC and attend there. But Minnesota, if you guys who are listening haven't even checked out Minnesota, oh my God, check it out! It's beautiful. It's a lovely school, amazing. The people are amazing. I'll be there, but it's such a. I was so thrilled when I visited. And that's another thing is in admissions, if you're fortunate and able to visit. But that's a whole separate podcast. I won't take up too much time talking about that.
Yeah, if you're going to Minnesota, go and say hi to Ethan.
Yeah.
Great. I have 2 more questions here. First is, did you have any pre-test routine, something that you did before you would take the test, or did you kind of just go in and just take it every time?
Yeah, so I kept the routine the exact same every time I took the test. I didn't stray from it. I woke up at the same exact time every day, and I signed up for the final test at an early time. It was either 7:30 or 8. It didn't work out the way that I wanted it to in the end in terms of like timing. So I think I signed up for a 7:30 slot, maybe. I can't really remember, but it was close enough to my routine that I wasn't offset by it. But I would go to bed the night before, have my alarm set for like 7:30 a.m. The weather was nice in South Carolina, so I was able to like walk outside in the morning with my coffee and get some sunshine. And then I would have like a 5-minute cool down spot where I was like set up, have my materials, have my 5 pieces of paper, have my pen, and get in the zone, the auto zone, whatever. But God, and I would sit, and that was it. I mean, that was my routine. I had the same exact breakfast of 2 eggs and like 2 pieces of toast every single time. And you might think that's like silly or gross, whatever. But if you trick your brain, like this is your conditioning, this is your Pavlov's little bell.
Yep.
And so I would have that morning, wake up, and then my brain was like, all right, we're about to sit here for 35 we're gonna crush it, we're gonna do great, awesome, thanks for letting me know that this is about to happen.
I love that. This is something that I've noticed is a really common theme among people that have scored a 170 plus, is they do have a routine. The routines are all different, right? Some people meditate, some people, like you said, eat the same breakfast, but it is so common that they have a routine. Like you said, you train your mind to know that, okay, it's test day. I'm about to go take this test, and you kind of get in a zone of, okay, I know my mind has to be working here. I've described this a ton of times, but athletes do it. I mean, specifically amongst like individual athletes.
Yeah, you're right.
Stuff. They have the same routine, and it's because it works. It trains your mind to know that, okay, it's time to go.
Yeah, and I would say it might feel goofy, and it might not. I mean, it won't work when you're doing it. Like while you're doing it, you won't even notice that it happened. But then come test day, I woke up, did my routine, and I was testing, and it was golden. It worked out for me. It was like it came and went. And so, 3 months in, when you're doing a practice test, you might be like, I don't want to do it. I'm going to stop doing this routine. But it builds over time, and it's really, I mean, that's a strong connection that our brains will make to whatever behavior.
Yeah,
there might be a specific song you listen to over and over, whatever works for you.
Yeah, and on test day, right? I mean, you're going to be nervous and stuff. So the best thing you can do is kind of treat it like any other practice test that you've taken.
Right.
So if you've taken a million practice tests and you've done the same thing on all of them, well, when you get in that routine, your mind's going to immediately think, okay, it's just another practice test, right? Which is really the goal. I mean, having a little bit of nervousness can be good, right? But you don't want to be so overly nervous that you lose sight of everything.
Yeah. So no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I am proof of this concept because, oh my God, I get anxious at any little thing. I'm like, a parent will email with a question and I would be anxious for like until the parent would finally respond and be like, oh, cool, thanks. But I woke up that day and I was just, like it was almost like a zen of like just not being worried and I had trained for that and I was treating it like just any other test and I didn't even mean to. It was just like, okay, test day. And you bet I was nervous the whole week leading up to it. Yeah. And a few days before I had that crisis of getting my score, which by all means, a 163 is a great score, and that's above average. And if you don't have a GPA like mine, if you have like a 3.9 or whatever those mythical 4.0s, then you're looking good. But I was like, crisis, I'm going to do awful. I'm going to fail. I'm going to do horrible. And then, day of woke up, did my routine. And I think having that routine lets you put on like robot mode and you don't panic. You don't freak out. You're just going through your own mode.
Yeah. Great point. I like that. Okay. Last question here. Do you have if someone was to ask you, what's the one tip that you would give, people starting the LSAT or just advice on the LSAT? What's the most important thing that you wish you had known?
Okay. A couple things come to mind, but number one, it's okay to not see improvement because you are improving and you just don't recognize it. And the number isn't going to tell us yet. And that improvement takes a long time. So just keep it up. Keep up your studies. You're doing great. Obviously, if you are 3 months in and you're still scoring the same as your diagnostic, then something's messed up and you need to maybe reevaluate. But if it's, a couple weeks and you take another test and you feel like you got these stuff better, you understood it better, but you score the same, that's fine. I had so many times where I thought, okay, I've done it this time. I've done so much better. Same exact score as the previous test. Now, specifics, logical reasoning, all those question types, they're all the same. Once you figure them out, they can have their weird intricacies. I mean, I think there was a question that was like, which of the following most strengthens the argument? And none of them strengthened it, but 4 of them weakened it. And one of them was just irrelevant. It didn't even have to do with the thing. So let's say the question was like, oh, dogs are nicer than cats. And then the 4 answers are like, cats use their claws to attack and that's mean. And cats smoke cigarettes and that's mean. And then one of the answers is like, oh, bananas are a delicious fruit for breakfast. That one somehow is the most strengthening because it doesn't weaken. And so there's those weird ones that you just, when you're taking the test, if you've prepared for all these different types of logical reasoning, which means you have to spend time with these weird niche categories, because I think you can look it up and you can see like what the breakdown of different questions is, but spend time with every type of question and figure out how they're going to go. And this isn't just like a one-time thing. You can't just cram it and be like, all right, I'm ready. It takes time. I really think this test is a test of conditioning rather than, knowledge. You can't just say, I know the question type, so I'm going to get it right. You have to, be able to go, okay, I know what to look for in the answer. Other small tips, eliminate all the other answers, my God, if you're able to go through and eliminate 4 answers, then you only have 1 answer to give, and the test does it for you. The logic games puzzles are very similar. If you perfect your setups, if you're getting in the routine, then all the answers are given to you. And it took me a while to figure out, but literally almost 99% of the time, the very first question in a logic game is going to give you a full correct setup within it. It goes, which of the following is a possible setup? So you'll have to eliminate the wrong ones, but then you're left with a full chart to add to yours. So, I usually would copy that down on my piece of paper next to my whole setup. I'd put it somewhere else, and you can look back at that. And if they're like, L is in the 2nd slot, therefore what is in the 4th slot? If you look at that pre-made one and it's got L there, then holy crap, you've got the answer. So
yeah, I like that. I like your point about logical reasoning, about eliminating answers too. There are questions that it's just so difficult to get the right answer. Like, you may not recognize what the right answer is at the time, but if you can eliminate all the wrong answers, then you've gotten the right answer.
On my reviews, for the longest time, for so many tests in a row, on the reviews, there are always those tough questions where you're between 2 answers. I would pick the wrong one. I would mark them. So while I'm on this paper test, right, I would fold the page and circle it, and I would go back to it within the test, and I would pick the wrong answer like 100% of the time. Between 2 options, I don't know why I did it. I was just being goofy. But when I was reviewing the test, I would sit down with these and go, why did I pick the wrong one? Why am I getting down to 2 options and then picking the wrong one? So other advice is, sit down with your test afterwards, even if you're frustrated, even if you hate it. Maybe put it to the next day if you really can't stomach it. But you've got to find out why you're getting questions wrong. Otherwise, you're not going to get more right, because you're just going to keep making the same mistakes. So you're not going to be able to recognize your mistakes until you sit down with them and look at them, which, God, that sounds like such like, oh yeah, you've committed a serious crime. You have to sit with your mistake.
But it is true. I think it's easy, especially when you first start studying for the LSAT. You just want to see a score, right? And you're like, and you want to rush to get that score. You're like, I got whatever, 158. That's 2 points better than what I previously got. But that's not your goal. Your goal, if your goal isn't to score 158, if you're trying to score 170, right? So you want to, even if you want to rush to your score, the more important thing to do is just review your test. So blind review it. Take time to go over the questions after you've taken it, because that's where you're really going to see the game. And you recognize your flaws. What do I make mistakes on, and how can I improve that?
I think you made a really cogent point here, is that, our studying isn't to improve the study score. Your study scores are going to be maybe reflective of your final score, but they're not the end all be all. So if we're doing our studies and we are focused on the number and we're like, oh heck, I scored the same thing last week or 2 weeks ago, and we are upset, sure, it's okay to be a little upset, but you're right. We have succeeded, right? The studying is putting this all to work and figuring out the wrong answer. So even if you haven't seen improvement technically, you still are improving. You're still getting closer to your goal, and you are still becoming better at the test. So good point. And I think that deserves to be just amplified.
I love that. Let's finish up there. I think that's a good point to finish on. It was a pleasure having you, Ethan.
Nice to meet you, Hunter.
It was really nice to meet you. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.